Hello everybody, welcome to week 7. Today I'm going to go through a super simple tutorial on uploading CSV data, configuring it in a web map, and publishing it to a web app. So some of you might already feel pretty comfortable with this exercise we're going through with the basic concepts that underlie it, but in any case it's good to just see somebody else do it and to always get as much practice as you can. So let me close my fancy title screen there. First thing I want to do is just go back and double check that earthquake data spreadsheet you created last week, the CSV file, and just quickly review what you have in there. As you can see, I selected 5 different fields, so time, latitude, longitude, depth, magnitude, and place. So everything looks good for now. Of course, you can always go back and refine your data. But I'm going to close the data. Now I'm going to go into ArcGIS Online and sign in. Always make sure, at least for this exercise, that you are signing into your CWC account and not your _GeoApps account or any other administration you might have an account with. This is so it can be shared with me and with others in the class in the future. So, okay, sign in. So here I'm going to navigate to my content or upload the CSV data. You can actually upload the CSV data also just through the map itself, but I will do it through here. So I'm going to click on Add Item from my computer, choose File, and find my earthquake data. There it is. And here we can customize the upload process. We have to add tags, always a little annoying sometimes. I want to leave it publish as a hosted layer, and here I'm going to obviously leave it checked as latitude, longitude, but you could actually have a CSV file with addresses and it would also find it. And here you want to just double check your fields that it matches up with what you had in the spreadsheet, which it does. You can also check your field types, make sure the numbers and the field types match up with what the field is, and then also make sure that the location fields are correct, which they are. And of course we leave it on UTC. So I will add the item. And we will arrive at the detail page for the new feature layer we've just created. So I am going to open this in Map Viewer. And it's going to display the default display for the data. So in this case, number 1, choose an attribute to show. The default it selected was depth, I think just because it's at the top of the list. But I actually want to show magnitude for this particular project. So I'm going to select magnitude, or mag. You could add attributes if you wanted as well. And below we select a drawing style. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 options here for drawing styles. And you can actually, by clicking on select, you can preview what each one looks like, just to sort of give you some idea of different ways your data would be represented. It's fun to go in and actually choose different attributes and then choose your different drawing styles just to sort of see what would happen. In this case, we're going to do counts and amounts because we're dealing with magnitude on a scale that increases. So I'll click select on that, click options on that. And we're taken to the customization page. Now this is the default view that has broken it into 5 different categories or levels. And with the slider bar here, you could actually change the range at which it's choosing to break and make the different circle sizes and levels. I'm going to leave it as it is. And over here, you can actually change the symbol if you just want to do a quick change. You could, come over here, click shape, and do a pink star or something. And it keeps it in that graded style. If we go down, scroll down a little further, you see we can manipulate the transparency and the visible range. We want to keep it at world, especially since we're dealing with global data. Perhaps most importantly here, we can classify the data. So let's click on Classify. And if you click the arrow next to Natural Breaks, where it says Natural Breaks, you'll see that there are 5 different kinds of ways to classify the data. And classifying data is quite important in as you move forward in your GIS and mapping careers, because it can really change the outcome and the meaning of the data that you put on your map. And I've included some links to explaining that in more detail on the narrative of this tutorial. But for now, we actually want to stick with natural breaks. So creates classes based on the natural grouping of the data. So that means where things naturally are creating little peaks. If you have a histogram, is where it's going to create the breaks. So I'm going to keep it at 4 classes. And you could actually round the classes if you wanted, but I'm going to just keep it at its default. And up here, down here, I'll click OK. Oh, let's go back into options, sorry. I actually want to, I moved ahead of myself too quickly. What I want to do now is actually change the symbology. I don't think having everything the same color makes a ton of sense in terms of representing the information. So I'm going to click on Legend, and it's going to show me my 4 different star sizes. And what I want to do is actually change each one to something that is a little bit more eye-catching and meaningful. So if I just click on one of the symbols, I'm going to start with the largest one. That brings up the editing box. So here I'm going to click on the down arrow next to Shapes. Go to Basic. Select the circle. Change the fill. I'm going to start and do a little graded rainbow coloration. I'm going to click red. It's already set at 50% transparency. I'm going to leave that since I want to be able to see the different colors through each other. And on the outline, I'm going to click on this gray box with the red line through it. That's going to give me no outline. I much prefer no outlines. Less to deal with. So click OK. And go through each star and change it as you see fit. So change the fill, outline, OK, and here, shape, fill to yellow, outline to none, and then our last one is going to be green, circle, green, no outline. Okay. Now the last thing I want to do here is actually change the minimum size of that symbol here. So where it says size, you can adjust how you want the circles to display in comparison to one another. I always feel that default for that smallest is too small. You can't really appreciate its size. I'm going to bring it up to 20 in this case. A little bit more impact there. Okay, so now we're going to select OK and Done. That's going to save our information that we just configured. Now I want to configure the pop-ups. So go up to make sure you're on Details, Content, and you see our layers that we have in our table of contents here. If you hover over earthquake data, it turns blue, and you can click on the 3 dots or the ellipses for more options. And we're going to go down to Configure Pop-up. Because we have those fields of data in the CSV file, this means we can create pop-ups, which is obviously a really great thing about doing maps in ArcGIS Online, because you can have this kind of interactive quality to it. So of course, Show Pop-ups is already enabled, which is good. I want to change the pop-up title to, let's see, call it Magnitude, Place, and Magnitude and Location, actually. Of course, you could make it whatever you want. Under Display, I will leave it under as a list of field attributes, although you could obviously choose otherwise, but this is a good default. The box underneath shows the available fields that will display. If you didn't configure it, configure it below, you would just get that information. But what we're going to do is make it look a little nicer and neater. So we're going to click on Configure Attributes. And it takes you to the editing page here. So what we see here are all of the fields that were in our CSV file. And if you go up to where it says Display, there's a little empty box next to it. If you click it and then unclick it, you can select and deselect everything, all the fields there. This comes in very handy when you've got a large amount of fields and you only want to select like a small handful of items, and you don't want to go through and just unclick every single one or whatever. So in this case, we don't have too many to deal with, so it's not as vital, but I am going to include in my pop-up the time. I don't want to include the latitude and longitude. I don't think that is as important to what this map is trying to show. The depth could be interesting, so I'll keep that. Magnitude, of course, place, and I'll unclick FID. Now, of course, I want to make these fields look nice in the pop-up. So I'm going to give time, a capital T, give depth, capital D. I'll spell out magnitude, and I'm going to call place location instead. And then depending on the field type, you can actually double check that the format is the way you want it to be if it's numeric. So for instance, this is 2 decimal places for depth. Format here is date, so you can actually click that and manipulate the date, the look of the date. And location is a string, so that doesn't matter as much. Okay, so we've configured how we want the pop-up to look, so we click OK. If you wanted to add images, you could click Add Image, and it would take you through the upload process. Keep in mind that if you add images here in this pop-up, the image will display on every single pop-up in this layer. So it's not going to be individual to each location. It will be every single time, because this is all one layer right now, of course. So every time I click a point, it will show the individual information for the point, but it will show the one photo or image you have uploaded here. So for now, we're going to leave that alone. We'll click OK. So let's test our pop-up. So click here. So great, we've got a nice looking, has a title. The fields they look nice, they're formatted well. Everything makes sense. So we can close that. Okay, so we're almost ready to move on to publishing as a web app, but let's just actually check a couple more of the pop-ups, make sure everything looks good. Now here you see it says 1 of 2. That means there are 2 layers of pieces of data that are very close to one another, obviously, and they are one on top of the other. So you can click through the 2 and see. And there's some places where there's a lot of stuff that's layered, obviously, right there. That's not as many, but let's see. Let's find one. I find one that has a lot. Well, believe me, there are places where there's like 6. There's 3. Okay. And also, don't forget, we can change the base map as well. They're very fond of using the light gray canvas in the MOOC tutorial, but I'm going to keep it with how it is now, kind of like the contrast of colors. So now we want to move on to publishing this as a web application. The first thing we're going to do, of course, is save it. We're going to call this Earthquake Data Web Map, and the domain tags earthquakes. Save map. Alright, and now we're going to share it, the ever somewhat confounding sharing. So be sure that we are sharing, you can share with everyone, but in this case we'll just share with Central Wyoming College. And as we've seen, it's asking me and making sure that the layers involved in creating this application are also shared. So I will go ahead and give it permission to update the sharing. And I'm going to share the current map extent because it's global map. This is how I want it, but of course you could go back and make sure your extent is where you want it to be if you want to have a particular snapshot of an area of the world. Okay, so now that we've set the sharing configurations, we're going to create a web app. Now I always find, generally speaking, looking at the different kinds of web apps you can create a little overwhelming, still to this day. So in this case, I'm going to actually just stick with the basic viewer. It really does a fine job of just getting these simple maps across. So I'm going to select and create